It's time to feel what you've been bottling up. Life in rural America isn't easy. The long hours, the constant pressures, the demands of the land, livestock, and family, it all takes a toll. We're tough and we've got grit, but somewhere along the way, toughness started meaning bottling up emotions and powering through. But here's the truth. That strategy, it's not working and it's poisoning us. Maybe you've noticed and maybe you haven't, but the numbers don't lie. We're breaking down and it's showing up in our bodies, our relationships, and in the rising suicide rates in agriculture. You don't have to carry any of it alone. There's another way. If you're ready to stop being weighed down and start moving forward, my one-on-one good movement guidance is now open. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more and see if one-on-one guidance could be for you.
I'll carry you, you carry me, we'll help each other through it. Come on and see, good movement draws good movement.
Welcome to Good Movement Draws Good Movement, the podcast where farmers, ranchers, and rural folks can grow relationally through awareness, understanding, and effective communication. Hey, it's T. I'm your host, and I, along with my guests, will be covering topics related to drawing good movement. Things like self and social awareness, brain science, positive psychology, extending grace, and so much more. We'll share tools that can help you understand why you are the way you are, why others are the way they are, and how you can use that to step out of self-told lies with grace and compassion to draw good movement in conversations, relationships, and life in rural America. Let's go draw good movement. Welcome back to the Good Movement Draws Good Movement podcast. If you tuned in last week, then you might already know what's coming this week. Last week, I talked about when I spoke in Utah, and I talked briefly about validation in that episode. And I said, we're just going to make this a little series. So this is part one of our series on validation. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what validation is and why it's important. So let's just dive right in. Validation is the process of acknowledging and recognizing someone's feelings, thoughts, or experiences as legitimate and real. Even if you don't agree with them or even really understand them, it's about making the other person feel seen and heard, which fosters trust, connection, and emotional safety in relationships. And when I say validation is the process of acknowledging and recognizing someone's feelings, that someone could be you. And I'm not saying that someone else is validating your feelings. I'm saying that you are validating your own feelings. So, with that, why is validation important? Well, first of all, when people feel validated, and we all want to feel validated, seen, heard, we want to feel those things. So when people feel validated, they are more likely to open up, express their true feelings, because they know they aren't going to be judged or dismissed. And this creates a really good environment for growing deeper connection. Validation also reduces conflict. A lot of times, conflict arises when people feel misunderstood or unheard. Validation can help diffuse the tension by showing the other person that their perspective is valued, even if it's very different from your own. Validation also strengthens relationships. It builds trust and strengthens bonds because it signals respect and empathy. And when people feel seen and heard, they are more likely to feel connected and supported. Validation also fosters self-awareness. So when we validate others, we also model emotional awareness. So this can encourage other people to become more attuned to their own emotions, helping them understand and process what they're feeling. And that's like a win-win because it helps us do the same thing. We become more attuned to other people. They become more attuned to us. They become more attuned to themselves. We become more attuned to ourselves. It's just good across the board. So validation can be a key tool to break through emotional and miscommunication barriers. It's a way of saying, I see you, I hear you, and what you are feeling matters. And that, my friends, is so incredibly powerful. What validation is not, now that we've been over what it is and why it's important, what validation is not, because I do think that there has been some misunderstanding surrounding what validation is. I think that sometimes we get caught up in believing that validation means that we agree with someone, or that by validating them in what they're feeling, we agree with what they're feeling or with their behaviors. And that is absolutely not what it is. I think sometimes we think that by validating someone, we have to fully understand what we're validating. And that also is not true. So here is what validation is not. Validation is not agreement or approval. You do not have to agree with someone's thoughts, feelings, or actions to validate them. It simply means acknowledging that their experience is real and valid for them, even if you do not share the same perspective at all. Validation also is not fixing or solving. It's not about offering solutions or trying to fix the problem. It's about listening and showing compassion without jumping into problem solving mode. Sometimes people just want to be heard. And sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do for people is sit and listen to them without even saying anything. Validation is not dismissal or minimization. So it's not brushing people's emotions to the side or saying things like, it's not that bad, or you'll get over it, or must be nice, or must be rough. Like those things are not helpful. Validation means that you are truly hearing someone and you're not minimizing whatever it is that they're going through. False reassurance also is not what validation is. So saying things like everything's fine, or don't worry about it, or it'll all come out in the wash, or everything works out, or everything happens for a reason, without acknowledging someone's feelings can feel very dismissive, and it's very unhelpful. Truly validating someone is acknowledging their experience before you try and offer comfort or your perspective. Validating someone also does not mean pretending to understand. It's not about pretending to understand exactly what someone is going through. If you don't have to understand what someone else is going through in order to validate them. It's about recognizing that their feelings are legitimate and real, even if you can relate not one bit. So again, when I'm saying validating someone, that could be you validating yourself. You are someone. So now that we've been over what validation is, why it's important, and what it's not, I want to just bring this around and back to agriculture. Because last week when I was speaking, and I've said this in groups before of cattlemen and women, but when we get to thinking that validation is soft or unnecessary, or we are confused about what it means, I like to use stockmanship and go back to stockmanship as an example, because when we are practicing low stress cattle handling, we are validating our cattle all the time. If you are someone who handles cattle or livestock of any kind, horses, pigs, sheep, I'm sure it's very similar across the board, but you are validating those animals every time you handle them. If you are in your herd of cattle and you see one with its head up and its ears forward and its body is tense, you know what that means. You know that animal is very aware and something is not quite right. They are ready to bolt at any moment and or, come eat your lunch. And so we don't just keep pressing those animals. We validate them, and we do that in stepping back and giving them some space. Now, the ways in which we validate our cattle are different, but we still do validate them, because if we don't, with those high-headed, very aware, watchy cattle that either might eat your lunch or they're giving you all the signals that they might eat your lunch, if you don't validate those animals, they're going to hurt you. And so we do validate our animals. And it's in their best interest, but it's also in our best interest. And that is the same with humans. Validating others is in their best interest because we're letting them know that we see them and we hear them. And that opens up the line of communication. And it's in our best interest for the very same reasons. We're letting them know that we see them, we hear them. It's an open line of communication. So we can proceed from a place of better understanding and compassion and curiosity. And those things will get us a lot farther than the alternative. I also like when Warwick Schiller says, or in his books or in his videos, when he's talking about working with horses. If you're not familiar with Warwick Schiller, he is an outstanding horseman, and I really have enjoyed learning from him. Tom started learning from Warwick a long time before I did. I just sort of got on the Warwick train this year, but I've thoroughly enjoyed learning from him. And he says, when you're working with your horse and trying to build that connection with them, you have to be aware of their awareness. So when their ears are forward, their head goes up, when they're not blinking. And then based on what the horse is telling you, that determines your actions. That's validation. And we can do the same with our fellow humans, and it will build that stronger connection, just like how being aware of a horse's awareness and proceeding accordingly builds that stronger connection with your horses. It can do the same thing with your fellow humans. And when you're validating yourself, it can do the same thing with you. So that's all we're going to talk about for today. We've touched on what validation is, why it's important, and what it's not. And next time, we will be talking about some different ways to validate and be validated. So with that, until next time, draw good movement. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful for you. If you found value in this episode, I'd love for you to share with others who might also benefit from tuning in. Share by word of mouth, send it in a text, take a screenshot and post it on social media, or share however you prefer. And if you haven't already, hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until next time, draw good movement.